We've all got one thing in common. We're inching closer to 65 years old, and that brings Medicare. Amy Terrell is my guest, and we'll break down the ABCs of Medicare next on the Compounding Change podcast.
This is the Compounding Change Podcast, sharing stories of small but meaningful changes that compound into amazing impact. Brought to you by Shannon Davis and DavisCompoundingChange.com. Change happens fast. Take advantage. Discussions on this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Retirement Plan Advisors LLC, a federally registered investment advisor. Cambridge Investment Research and Retirement Planning Advisors are not related to DavisCompoundingChange.com or this podcast. Now, here's your host, Shannon Davis.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Compounding Change. I'm your host, Shannon Davis, and today we're diving into something that sneaks up on a lot of people as they head into retirement: Medicare. I know it's neither exciting nor sexy, but something many of us will eventually deal with. So whether you're a firefighter getting close to retirement, helping a parent figure things out, or just wondering what happens when you turn 65. This episode's going to make Medicare feel a whole lot more manageable. I'm joined today by Amy Terrell, an experienced and licensed Medicare agent who's helped hundreds of people navigate this process with less stress and more clarity. What I really appreciate is how Amy takes time to help people. She helps them slow down, to understand their options, and make smart decisions that align with their life and their goals. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Yes. I've spent a lot of time focused on Social Security for my clients, but I'm looking forward to more insight on Medicare. That one's a big one. There's a big book, right? But first, I'm always interested in other people's stories. So can we start with your story? What drew you to be influenced or focused on Medicare?
Sure. Well, first I'll explain the company I work for is My Medicare Network. And My Medicare Network originated years ago at a soccer game. The two managing partners, they actually have daughters that play soccer with my daughter. So they were at a soccer game the one day complaining to each other about signing up their parents for Medicare. They said, this is such a pain. This is taking so long. I'm on the phone for hours. I'm getting hung up on. Like, this is crazy. So as they were talking to each other, they had originally wanted to start a business. So they thought, you know what? I think this is an opportunity to help a lot of people. So My Medicare Network was originated at a soccer game.
Wow.
So then talking to them, the business was doing well, and we're at another soccer game years later, and they're just like, hey, I think you would be great at this. You should come work for us. And so
Nice.
we did. I'm like, okay, that
Right.
sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
So you're at the soccer field enough, you're going to, things are going to happen because that's where you are all the time. So
Yep. That sounds organic and relatable. I know that I've, been there myself with things. It's kind of how I got into the business, just, one conversation after another, right?
right.
So to questions, this might sound like an uber simplistic question, but what exactly is Medicare and who qualifies for it?
All right, well, I'll give you the simple answer. It's a federal health insurance program primarily for people who are 65 and older. There's a few people, like if you're younger, if you're on disability or you have end stage renal cancer or renal disease, they can qualify too. So that's keeping it very simple.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Thanks for breaking that down. When you get into it, there's a lot of abbreviations, acronyms. I know a lot of people hear terms like Part A, B, C, D. I think there's even more, right? But I know it's also been referred to as like alphabet soup. It goes on and on. So can you
Right.
explain what each of those parts actually covers in like real people or just basic terms?
Right. I think with Medicare, they make it so confusing and it really is like alphabet soup. So if we could keep it as simple as possible so people can understand that that's the way to go. So that's how I like to teach people. So the main letters that we'll talk about today. So there's part A, and that covers hospital stays, skilled nursing, and hospice care. Then there's part B that covers medical services like your doctor visits, your outpatient care. You have part C, which is your Medicare Advantage plans, and that's private insurance plans, and they bundle your A and B with extra benefits. And we'll get into that a little bit more later for sure, because that's a big subject. And then there's part D, which is your prescription drug plans.
Okay. I should have been taking notes.
That's okay.
Yeah. Well, so
You don't
that
have to have it memorized. It's all
right.
right.
That's what you're there for. Well, that does help. Before we get into the like nitty-gritty of all of that, what about timing? So I know that's often an area of confusion, and I think sometimes people assume, and I know even with Social Security, whatever, people assume that we're automatically enrolled at age 65, but you and I know that's not the case. And there's a window of time. And what I do know is that it's like 7 months, right? 3 months
You're
before
right.
the month of your birthday, and then 3 months after.
Yes.
But as we also know, things don't happen overnight.
No.
So when should someone really start paying attention to enrolling in Medicare?
My sweet spot for people enrolling in Medicare is 64 and a half.
Okay.
So if someone's going to refer somebody to me, that is what I like because that gives us time to put together a game plan.
Okay.
So like because you have to sign up for your A and your B, and then you have your other, either an advantage plan or a supplement. So we need to determine the route that we want each individual to go. So that's the sweet spot. You really can't sign anybody up until 3 months prior, but getting together at 64 and a half is really the perfect time to get everything so it's smooth, so it's very smooth. And sometimes you're dealing with signing up on the internet, or you're talking with Social Security, and they can be delayed. So we don't want to worry about a delay. So if we can do this ahead of time, that's the best way to do it.
Okay. So those conversations, you have a couple months and then you can kind of kick it into gear.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, so I've had a number of people ask me about if they're still working. So what if they're working at age 65? Is there ever a good reason to wait? I mean, you hear about Social Security 62, 63, 65, 67. I mean,
Right.
there's all over the board. I don't think Medicare is like that, of course, but there are people who are still working. Maybe they have spousal benefits. Is there a good reason to wait, or do you just jump on?
I've seen a lot of people that are working at 65 and older. Now, I think what people think is if they're 65 and older, that they should just stay with their company insurance
Hmm.
because they're working.
Right.
And that does make, it makes sense in a way, but the reality is if you're turning 65, you are eligible for Medicare. You don't necessarily have to stay on your company plan.
Or
What I've
stop
been doing
working.
Right. Oh,
Okay.
yes, definitely. You don't have to stop
Right.
working. So, what I've been doing for a lot of clients is I've been comparing their company plans to Medicare. And
Okay.
I check and see because a lot of the company plans have high deductibles, high premiums, and Medicare doesn't usually have a lot of high deductibles or high premiums. So, it's something that's worth comparing
Mm-hmm.
because 8 times out of 10 that I've seen, the Medicare plan seems to be the better plan.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
But
if it isn't, that's well and good. Then I say, hey, give me a call when you retire, and we'll talk then.
isn't it also true, though? I mean, in that comparison, that you have to be cognizant of if that person has an HSA, because if they have a high deductible, once they go on Medicare, they can't contribute,
Correct.
right? Okay.
That's true.
So just something to consider, but I'm sure you take all of that and working with me, working with you, all that would come into play, right?
We all work together.
Right, exactly. One big happy
Exactly.
family. So once they're ready to sign up, you said, 3 months before or 64 and a half, once they're ready to sign up, how does it actually work? Do they go online, talk to somebody like you? I mean, is that like a requirement, or do they have to go to deal with Social Security office?
They ideally they would work with me
Okay.
because I'm the one that knows like the timelines and where to go. So if they would just call me, I
Mm-hmm.
can guide them through that process. And that's why I like the 64 and a half age so much, because we have the time to plan all of this. Now, I know sometimes people wait till the last minute, and I get it. Life gets busy.
Mm-hmm.
We can make things happen. It's just sometimes we have to plan accordingly because we don't know, will there be a backup? We don't know. So it's better to not wait, but if we do, we could still work through it. It's not a problem.
What if they what if they waited until like the very last minute of that 7-month window? What happens then? I mean, if they get the application in, is that, or are
Yes,
they
they will backdate it. They're
okay?
good about that, but then I can't sign them up for a plan if I don't see that they're approved on their Part B. I can't really sign them up for a plan. So
Gotcha.
what happens is when I try to do that, it gets denied, and I'm like, why is this getting denied? Because it
Right.
shouldn't.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
better not to wait too long, but they will backdate it, so then you're not getting any kind of penalties.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. So,
Yes.
speaking of that, backdating and penalties, let's talk about costs, because there's this common assumption, or maybe I think it's a common assumption, but I've talked to people, but they think Medicare's free, right?
Right.
And that's not exactly true.
It's not exactly true. For Part A, it's usually automatic for people because they have been paying the Medicare taxes and working for 10 years plus.
Okay.
So then you don't have to worry about it. So, like your Part A, you're good to go. If you haven't worked or your husband hasn't worked in the 10 years plus, you are going to pay some money for that. And it's either $285 or $518, just depending on if you have worked at all and how long.
Okay.
So that will be determined. That's not something I would determine, but that will be determined like through Social Security, Medicare.gov,
So
that kind of
that's where it ties together with Social Security and Medicare. It's still
thing.
kind of
Right.
the same qualification.
Same ballpark, just different arena. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you said you gave that range. Is it anywhere in between, or is it just
Yes.
either or?
Anywhere in the in between, just depending on how long you've worked.
Okay. Okay. So that's
If
basic.
you have it all.
That's
Right.
basic Medicare.
Basic. And then there's Part B,
Okay.
which right now the average cost of Part B is $185.
Okay.
Now, I would say majority of people I see, that's what they're paying for the Part B, but it is income based. So there's a grid. So when I get together with people, I talk to them. I don't need to know a lot about their income, but with regards to Part B, I need to know a little bit. So they
Okay.
do a 2-year look back, and that's how they determine.
Okay.
So the lowest you'll pay is 185. The highest you would pay would be $628.90.
Okay.
And that's based on an income of $500,000 for individual or $750,000 joint. So this
Okay.
is based on tax returns. So that's the most you would pay. Most people look at me and laugh. They're like, "Whoa, no, I don't make that much." And I'm like, "Okay, that's fine
Right.
if you do, but
Right.
it is income based with regards to Part B."
Now, I have firefighters who've gone into, reemployment after retiring. So how does that play into that? And if they had that high income up prior to 65, is there a form or something that we can say, hey, my life changed. This isn't continuing.
Yes.
I'm not really high
You've
income.
worked hard to get where you are. But now what? Hi, I'm Jenna Stoliker, a leadership coach who helps people navigate change with intention. So you don't just survive the next chapter, you grow through it. Whether you're stepping into something new or wondering what's next, let's find your next right step. Learn more at jennastoliker.com.
Is there a form or something that we can say, hey, my life changed. This isn't continuing.
Yes.
I'm not really high income.
The nice thing with Medicare is you're not stuck with that original 2 years, because they realize like you're retiring and maybe you're not even going to be working anymore. So maybe those 2 great years you had prior to retirement, you're not stuck with that. So
Okay.
you can do another look back and say, hey, my things have changed. I'm not making as much now. So then that, $628.90 goes down to maybe like two something.
Okay.
It definitely can adjust.
So obviously, if you just quit working, you're not going to look back immediately. You've got to wait so that you have another 2 years so you might have that high.
Right.
Okay.
You may
For
have 1 or 2 years that your premium for Part B is on the higher side, but then for the rest of your life, it will adjust.
Right, right. And then that's why we talk about not necessarily doing Roth conversions all within specific
Right.
windows, but that would mean that, so say somebody wanted to at 67 do a Roth conversion, but they've not been working since 63, all of a sudden the IRS Medicare is going to see this jump in income and be like, whoa, you have to pay more.
Well, if that's only if you're going and looking back. So
Okay.
if you're what's the word I want to use? Contesting it.
Okay.
They're not going to continually go back and look at every person on Medicare,
Okay.
but that's if you want to contest it. So
Okay.
you're usually only contesting it is if you're making less because
Okay.
you don't want to pay as much.
So if somebody ultimately retired if one of my firefighters retired at 57, but didn't actually go back to work until 65, but they've already gone on to Medicare. I mean, I'm sure anybody listening is like, I'm not going to do that. But, but I mean, theoretically, then there potentially wouldn't be a look back with that
Right.
income. Okay.
Well, if they're signing up for Medicare at 65, there will be the 2-year look back because they were signing up originally.
But they didn't have the high income.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So you've mentioned all these different levels and different payments, but what about the things that aren't covered? And I like the gaps that tend to surprise people. What should people keep in mind there?
So, what you really need to keep in mind are you talking about like the gaps with Part A and B?
Well, yeah. So how can people fill those gaps? Like, walk us through the differences between Medicare Supplement or Medigap or Medicare Advantage Plan. I mean, I think that gets confusing for people with all these different, you know,
It
words of
absolutely
what
does.
it is.
So, when you're on just Part A and Part B, that's called Original Medicare.
Okay.
You're paying 20% of everything. So I know people say to me, I don't really go to the doctor that much. I'm never in the hospital. So 20%, big deal. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, big deal. When you get life flighted and you
Right.
get that bill and you have to pay 20% of that, then they're like, oh, yeah, that's the problem.
Right. Right.
So bills can get a little hefty with just being on original Medicare. So that's where you do want to cover the gaps and you want to be either on a Medicare supplement or a Medicare Advantage plan. So both work hand in hand with Part A and B. So with a supplement, it covers like out of pocket costs like your deductibles, co-pays, co-insurance. There's really no network restrictions. Pretty much see any doctor they want to as long as they accept original Medicare.
Okay.
The problem with supplements is that you have to pay for them every month and they go up every year in price. So they could get a little pricey as you get older. You also have to pay for your prescription drug coverage separately, vision, dental, all separate. So it's very, very a la carte. So that could get a little bit pricey. But what people like about supplements is once you pay all that up front, you don't really see a lot of bills down the road. So
Like budgeting.
right,
Yeah.
that very
Right.
much. But then you look at like a Medicare Advantage plan. And the premiums are usually zero. They're very low. I mean, they might be up to $50. They could be a little bit higher, but not much. You do have networks. You have your HMOs, you have your PPOs, and that's when you want to determine if your doctors are in network. Now we live in, a lot of us live in Northeast Ohio here. We have Cleveland Clinic, we have UH. They're in our backyard. So most of these carriers are covering these big hospitals. I would say out of state, anyone out of state, the big hospitals there, these carriers want to be hand in hand with them. So usually not necessarily a problem with regards to being covered.
Okay.
Medicare Advantage plans have a lot of extra benefits. They cover vision, hearing, dental. They do transportation, like to and from doctor's offices or to get prescription drugs. They have over-the-counter benefits, so you get like a quarterly allowance for, we'll say, like vitamins, cold medicine, Advil, things like that. So
Wow.
that comes in handy. A free gym membership. Usually it's like silver sneakers. So
Oh,
anyone,
nice.
anybody that has the silver sneakers, you can go there for a free membership. So it's just there are a lot of perks. It's great for somebody that doesn't see a lot of doctors, doesn't really go to the hospital, and just wants everything all in one and not to pay a lot up front.
Right. Right. Kind of like what we want with our airlines, right?
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah. So that's a lot. Now it's funny because I'm like, oh, this is how people start to glaze over when I talk, right? Because
Right.
it's like so much information. This is so helpful though. But how does someone decide? I mean, probably like with retirement, right? This is all part of it. But how does somebody decide what one might better fit their situation? Health?
Sure. Well, yes. So when I meet with somebody, I do what's called a Medicare assessment. And with the Medicare assessment, I find out what doctors are you seeing? What prescription drugs are you on? What hospitals do you go to? What's your sweet spot? Are you concerned with money? Things like that. I have a computer system. Put everything in the computer system, and then it shows me the best plans for each person. Now, Medicare is very individualized because I have husbands and wives come to me all the time and they're like, "We think we want to be on Anthem." And I was like, "Well, do you see the same doctors? Are you on the same prescription drugs?" And they're like, "No." And I'm like, "Well, then you might not, but you might. We don't know."
Right. Yep.
So doing that assessment is very helpful because then we could determine which plan's best. And I work with 14 of the top carriers. So if you think 14 carriers, each carrier has 8 to 10 plans, that's a lot of plans.
Yep.
So with me having the system and being able to talk directly with each individual, we can find the best plan for them instead of somebody calling all 14 carriers and determining which one's the best plan. That can take weeks.
Well, and if you've ever tried to research anything, whether it's Medicare, health insurance, a vacation, we all know how many spams, how many emails, how many phone calls we get from that. So nice to have somebody who can kind of navigate that
Oh
for us.
yes.
Yeah. So let's tie this into my world, right? It's all about me. It's my show,
Yeah, it's all
right?
about you.
But public safety. So I like to appeal to that because I work with a lot of firefighters and police officers. But if somebody's retiring from, say, a fire department, has access to a spouse's retirement plan or just retiring, what should they be thinking about when it comes to Medicare coverage going forward?
Right. Honestly, I would give the same advice to anybody else. I think the assessment's the plan, the key there.
Okay.
And again, like if they're on that company insurance, whether it's theirs, their spouses, or whatnot, it's worth doing a comparison.
Okay.
Whether we make a move, we don't make a move, that's okay. Because I don't charge anything for doing assessments ever. So it's worth doing it and checking and seeing if it's worth making a move or not making a move.
What I think is really great that you said is that what's good for one might not be good for the other. Not just people in general, but that your spouse could actually still be employed. I mean, I know a lot of people's thoughts is, okay, well, my spouse is going to work maybe till they're 65, but I'm going to be 70, so I'm all set. But
Right.
maybe they benefit better from going on Medicare. So,
Right.
yeah,
You
this
don't know until you find, and you don't know until you look. So
right.
once you look, then you at least know.
It's all part of the planning, all part of the
Yes.
conversations.
Proper
Yes.
planning.
Right. So this has been so, like I said, so helpful. But what are some of the most common mistakes that people make when going through this process, and how can they potentially avoid them?
I would say one of the most common mistakes, like during open enrollment,
Hmm.
is when you see the commercials and you see the guy from Good Times and he's like, "Hey, come and join my company."
Right.
JJ doesn't care. if your doctors are covered on his plan or not.
Right.
He just wants you to sign up for the plan and that's it.
Yep.
That's a problem, because when you're on that plan and none of your doctors are covered, your prescription drugs aren't covered, that's a problem. That's going to be a high cost. So
Yep.
somebody like me, who I have access to the 14 carriers, I make sure that your doctors and your prescription drugs and your hospitals are covered. So those commercials, they can be helpful to guide in a way, but the end game, you really should be working with somebody who can help guide you through the whole process.
Right. And just because the actor's doing it doesn't mean they have your best
Doesn't mean
interest
it's
at heart.
okay.
Right. Right. So for the person who's feeling overwhelmed, like I said, you do one inquiry. It was for my mother-in-law, going through everything, and now I keep getting that the book, it really is about that thick, but they've got a mountain of Medicare mail and at home, and they don't know where to begin. And you know how it is, you're overwhelmed and you just start stacking stuff up and you don't really look at it. So what's your first piece of advice for them?
With the mail?
Well, just that you're
Yeah.
overwhelmed and you've got all this
Right.
mail. Yeah.
Right. I would definitely say you can look through the mail. There's nothing wrong with it. They're definitely showing you plans in your area, but the problem is you don't know if that plan is right for you.
Yep.
So it's okay to look through just to get some understanding of what's out there. But then when you talk to like a Medicare consultant like me, I can say, okay, well, that I like that plan, but let's make sure it's good for you. And also, I would say during open enrollment, which is October 15th, anybody 65 and older that's on a Medicare plan should get a Medicare assessment. I think that's thoroughly important, because somebody that's on a plan from 2018 might not be as good of a plan as 2025, 2026. So I think that's extremely important to be able to have that assessment to make sure, because these plans change every year and you may be missing out on a lot of benefits.
Right. So just because, I mean, you don't have to panic either, though, because even if you just made a mistake in a year, you have an opportunity to fix your mistake, right? Or make it better, to talk to somebody like you. So speaking of talking to you, if somebody wants to connect with you, get more support, where can they find you?
Well, they can find me at Amy at mymedicarenetwork.com is my email. And then I have a phone number. It's 440-744-3994. And that's my office line.
Okay.
And they could reach me anytime.
All right. Well, and hopefully they see this podcast episode and they get more information and feel comfortable reaching out to you. So,
well, that would be amazing.
Yes.
I love helping people through Medicare. Like it's great, and I love meeting everybody. And it's fun to take somebody through something that I know is confusing for them, and at the end they could say, "Wow, that wasn't that bad."
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. I know that I personally will be hounding you and bugging you about this, but thanks for helping us demystify it. Like I said, it has given me some clarity, and you've made a complex topic feel more approachable, less daunting. So I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you listening, just remember, Medicare isn't a decision you can make out of the blue. It ties to your entire financial plan, retirement strategy, your pension, your 457, your plan, your 401k, your 403b, your Social Security, all of that stuff. So if you've got questions about how these pieces fit together, I'd love to help you. Amy would too. You can reach out through Compounding Change, and we can talk through your specific situation. Like Amy said, everybody is different, so you're unique. And hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to like, follow, or subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If there's a topic you want us to cover or a guest you'd like to hear from, send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.
This has been the Compounding Change Podcast with Shannon Davis. If you are a firefighter or first responder, you know that change happens fast. Life changes, finance changes, compounding change. Shannon Davis is a certified retirement counselor who understands the needs of Ohio Association of Professional Firefighters members. Click on daviscompoundingchange.com to learn more. Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendations or investment advice. Always consult with your investment professional before making important investment decisions. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Retirement Plan Advisors LLC, a federally registered investment advisor. Cambridge Investment Research and Retirement Planning Advisors are not related to daviscompoundingchange.com or this podcast. Please note that investment involves risk and no statements made in this recording are indicative of future performance. The Compounding Change Podcast is brought to you by Shannon Davis.